Hey everybody, it's Peter, and this is the 2024 Kawasaki Vulcan 1700 Vaquero, and we're going to compare that to the Vulcan 1700 Voyager. These are the two big bikes from Kawasaki, and yes, they have not really changed a whole lot from the past. So what we're going to do in this review is compare them to each other, but also put them in the context of 2024 and help you decide if they're the right bikes for you. So first of all, here I'm filming at Jim Gilbert's Wheels and Deals, Jim Gilbert's Power Sports. This is the #1 volume Kawasaki dealer in the country, and I've usually take these down some stairs on some ramps and bring them to a whole other spot, but they're big bikes, they're up here in the main showroom, so today I get to film in the main showroom. So that's what we're going to talk about in these bikes. If you have questions about these bikes that I don't get to, make sure you subscribe and let me know in the comments the things you want to know, because I get to come back to these bikes again and again because the awesome people here at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports allow me to come in and come back to these bikes as often as I need to make sure that you get the answers you need. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe, hit the like button, give them a like for letting me film these things, and let's get going with this review. So let's put these two bikes in context. The first thing we have to talk about is the fact that they don't have some of the technology that other bikes in the class have. And if you dream of owning a motorcycle and playing with Apple CarPlay on the screen, these aren't the bikes for you. But if you dream of a traditional motorcycle that can take you places, and most of your dream is about the destination, about the journey, rather than about some of the technology, these bikes might be incredible values for you because they give you that true big bore V-twin feel with the reliability, and the fact that they've been around for a while actually opens up a whole bunch of things in the aftermarket, because these are reliable bikes for aftermarket companies to make parts for and know that there's going to be a market for them. So there's a lot of ways you can customize up these bikes, but as they sit, they're kind of customized in their own way. Each one appeals to a slightly different rider, and what we're going to do is go through the differences between the two. The first thing you're going to have to know is that this one is set up, the Voyager here is set up a little bit better for a two-passenger ride or a two-person trip, whereas the Vulcan Vaquero as equipped, is a little bit better for a single rider where you can have a second passenger for shorter trips. So we'll talk about some of those differences, but there's also a whole bunch of other differences. Let's dig into them right now. So the first thing to know about these bikes is they are heavy bikes, but one thing that's kind of interesting is when you hop across them, they don't feel that bad. You've got a nice low seat height. I'm about 6 feet tall, and even though it's got a wide seat, it narrows at the front. You've got plenty of space to put your feet down. You are quite comfortable on this, even at a stop sign, stoplight, stopped area, and they're not hard to maneuver because of the huge sweep back with these handlebars here. So there is a little difference on both bikes. We'll hop on the other bike in a second here, but let's talk about the motor on this. 1700 cc's, this is a huge V-twin engine, so it gives you that rumble that smooths out at speed. So you have that nice rumble at stop signs, at stoplights when you're idling, and it's got a great sound to it as well, but it gives you a lot of power without working too hard. So right away that gives you the smoothness that you need. And again, these bikes, unlike Kawasaki's sport bikes, are all about the torque. So you have that acceleration power, that smooth pickup, and unlike the regular Vulcan 900, you do have a 6-speed transmission here, which is what a lot of people like. If you're gonna go on long trips, this is a bike that will keep you completely comfortable, whether you choose the Voyager or the Vaquero. So let's start digging into a couple of the details here. We're gonna take a look at the Vaquero first, just to get a baseline of what is on this bike, and then we're gonna start pointing out some of the differences that are on the Voyager. So if you've seen my reviews before, we always talk about the front wheel, because at the front wheel you can talk about the manufacturer's intent of this bike. That's where you really see what manufacturer's intended, is all here in the front wheel. So first thing you've got is a 16-inch diameter front wheel. Pretty standard for the class, but that's an inch smaller metal wheel, right? Diameter of the wheel itself, an inch smaller than something like a sport bike. What that does is gives you extra tire here. So you have a little bit extra tire to help absorb some of those vibrations on the road. Again, a better touring style tire. So big tires here, nice and wide as well on the front. And again, they're able to carry a lot of weight because this bike is able to carry the bike itself, which is a heavier bike, as well as two passengers in addition to everything else that you want to take on a trip. So the other thing you'll notice here is a little different brakes than you see on a traditional sport bike. So you've got a dual caliper system here. A lot of cruisers, some cruisers only have a single caliper, but you got dual calipers here, Tokiko calipers. So again, strong brakes. The biggest difference on these brakes is really the one key piece of technology in this bike that you wouldn't expect. It's ABS with K-Act. Basically what this is Kawasaki has a completely separate ABS system on these two bikes than they have on anything else. And it's designed for the heavier bikes. And what it does is it does offer a linked braking system between the front and rear. So if you grab a whole bunch of front brake, it's going to avoid pitching, it's going to activate the rear brake as well. Same thing if you hit the rear brake and you grab a whole bunch of rear brake, it's going to activate the front brake as well. And basically it is speed sensitive and it's going to control the pitch of the bike. So what that does is it keeps everything in control. When you have a bigger bike and you have a lot of weight with passengers and other gear, you want to make sure that there's no surprises, no real quick shifting in weight, no no movement from weight shifting onto a front wheel or rear wheel that's going to cause you any traction issues. So the ABS system is linked with that sort of linked braking system, and it's designed specifically for these bikes to be smooth actuating. So basically what happens on a very lightweight bike, you can feel some of those differences quicker. On a heavier bike, you don't feel those differences as much and you can't adapt as quickly. So the computer is going to feel those differences for you and work with you to link those front and rear brakes to get that balance right between the front and rear. And like I said, being speed sensitive, it can really adapt itself to where it needs to use front and rear brake. You're still independently operating front and rear brake, but if it needs to, it will link those brakes as possible. And that's the same braking system on both bikes. So taking a look at the Vaquero, especially at the engine, we talked a little bit about its power, but let's just look at the style of this bike. First of all, you've got this new paint scheme. I want to be really clear that paint colors never show up perfectly on camera. So although you'll see something on camera, the lighting, the white balance, everything else can sometimes change that color. So it's a really cool color. You got to come see it in person if you really want to get a sense of what it's like. But it looks pretty cool. But you also have a frame color here that is a gray color to go along with this engine. Everything in there is gray with the chromed out fins, blacked out tops of the fins, chromed out sides of the fins, and then the chrome exhaust here. This is different on this Vaquero than it is on the Voyager. So we'll show you that in a second here. And it's also different than some of the previous model years. So again, the blue color, of course, new for 2024, but also just sort of some of the engine color. I like that this engine color is more of a dark gray, and again, that may not show up on camera, rather than a black. I think it just shows some of the detail a little bit better than the black, which kind of washes out. One quick thing to note, you have footboards up front, you have foot pegs out back. We're going to show you the footboards right now as we move our way through the bike. So one of the things I love about Kawasaki is whether you think of them as a sport bike company or just a true motorcycle company, one thing that people don't realize is they really do a good job of hitting the exact market that you want. And you can see little details like this rubber floating foot pad here. It moves separately than the actual foot pad itself, and it gives you some vibration avoidance. You've got the large foot brake here. Again, different style, more cruiser style than your sport bike type thing. So they're not part sharing between some of their other bikes. They're designing these bikes to be specific for this market, and they work really well. And again, having that big footboard gives you a lot of space to move around there. I can stick my big size 11 foot on there. You can kind of get a sense of how big it is. It's a pretty good size. My whole size 11 foot right there. So good size footboard and that big foot brake there. Let's move our way back. Staying with the Vaquero here, I want to show you these side bags here. A lot of people think they're the same. They actually are different. So you can pop that up, pop that like that, and you do have the traditional large bags here that open from the side. You're going to see a different opening on the Voyager, but it's worth pointing out, of course, you've got this clip there that holds everything in there if you want. You can also get accessory bags, so you could just take your bags out of here. One of the key things with these bikes is these bags on both these bikes are lockable with your main ignition key. The really nice thing about that is when you leave your bike, you know things are locked up and done for you. So slam lock if you want, lock it up like that. You know everything's locked in place. You know everything is also water resistant, or at least waterproof-ish, at least waterproof enough for me. And you can store everything you need. So again, no top box and slightly different side boxes on the Vaquero than on the Voyager. So one of the cool things with the Vaquero is you can see the dash here. Now there are some differences I'll point out right now. You can look at the sort of the red color in the gauges there. That is not there on the Voyager. The other thing, and this is why I love this blue color, is this is all blue painted on the rider side. You only get that on the Vaquero. On the Voyager, you're just gonna have a traditional black plastic, which does blend in with the color this year, but it's worth noting that this blue color that everybody else sees is also something that you're going to get to see on this bike. So we're gonna take a look at the dash in a second, but first thing we're gonna do is look at the unique ignition key here. This is different than what Kawasaki does on anything else. So we're going to try to zoom in there and I'll show you what we've got. So let me just step around the bike here. As you throw the key in here, you can see that you can turn the bike to the on position. Once it's there, I can fully start it up. But the other thing I can do is take that key out just like I did. The bike could be running right now. I'm not running it right now because it's in the showroom, but if you look at the bike in general, let's just zoom back out again, you can see the dash is on, everything's good. Like I said, I could fully start the bike up. So one of the key things with this, I guess I made a pun there, is a couple things. You can take the key out and open your luggage. Again, you need your key to operate that luggage or to lock it up, so you can do that if you want. One thing to remember though is to not leave your key at home. So put it in your pocket, that kind of thing, but it does save you from having your key chains and other those types of things dangling on this cool dash and staying in your way. So nice clean look, and you can see because of the design of it, if you want to turn the bike off, no problem. You can do that just with that switch right there. So kind of a cool feature. Both these bikes have it. It's the only Kawasaki bike that I know of that has this feature. And again, it makes a lot of sense. Before we take a look at the dash, let's turn the key on here and look sort of below the dash, and you can sort of see your communication radio system here, AM, FM, and weather band on here, which is kind of nice to have. You can see it says Kawasaki. There you go, it turns into FM. We've got the volume turned down right now. You've got these pretty good speakers out front, give you a nice volume there. You also have a communications ability, so you can have rider and passenger communications. There's adapters to fit inside the little storage thing there, so you can adapt all that, so you can have communication between different people. We're gonna turn that off for now, and we're gonna look up at the dash, which is just above that. So again, this is just sort of giving you an example of what's below there. Let's take a look at the dash. We'll zoom into this in a second. So I had it on accessory mode. We're gonna turn it fully on now, and you can see the couple main gauges to start. So first thing you have is speedometer right there, does the full sweep. Tachometer over here, 6,000 RPM red line. Again, you're not gonna be anywhere near that because these bikes make their power lower in the revs. Couple cool things that you do have here though is on the left side. Let me just see if you can see that as clearly as I can standing on the other side of the bike. Yeah, sort of, you can see it there. On the left side, right over there, it's listed as neutral. You have that 6-speed transmission, and it's gonna show you each gear. So 1 down below, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 up there. So you'll have a gear indicator on this bike, which is nice to have. You know, you can clearly see everything there. You got your odometer, you've got your fuel efficiency and that kind of thing. You can cycle through some of these things. So let me just see if I can do that right over here. So there's your fuel range, 92 kilometers till empty. Now most Kawasaki bikes don't show you that range until you start moving. This one is obviously showing us, even though we've got the bike sort of not running and not on. So kilometers per liter is what is listed. That's your average fuel efficiency. Again, this bike's only gone 2 kilometers, so you can kind of ignore the efficiency numbers until it gets a few kilometers on it. But it can be kilometers per liter, it can be liters per 100 kilometers. There's all kinds of things in here. There's lots of controls we'll show you on the handlebars here to show you all that kind of stuff. So we'll dig through that. Again, overall odometer up there, warning lights up top, fuel light up top there as well. Let's show you a couple other things. If you're wondering where your fuel gauge is or your temperature gauge, we're gonna go over, sweep down here. Fuel gauge is just on the side there, so about half a tank right there, and temperature gauge is over on the other side. So again, red backlit and a nice basic digital dash that gives you the basic that you need. You'll notice there's a cruise light down bottom and sort of the set light. Those are for your cruise control. We're gonna show you those controls on the driver's or on the throttle side, and then we'll come to the other side here and show you the other controls. Taking a look at the throttle side here, again, a little bit different grips than you have on any other Kawasaki bike. Again, they do a really good job of giving you the pieces that you would need on a typical cruiser like this. So big oversized kind of grips there. And then you've got big clunky controls as well. So again, most of the other Kawasaki bikes have smaller controls for some of these things. We'll zoom in a little further again here. Hopefully you can see them. Down the bottom, we've got your cruise controls. Let me just see if I can get them all in the shot there for you. A little bit shaky there, but we got it. Let's start at the very top. Obviously your kill switch, start switch built into, or kill switch there, start switch down there, and then you've got your hazard lights. Nice to have hazard lights on a touring bike, a large bike like this. This was your dash control that I was switching through with the fuel efficiency, and then down below that is your cruise control. So cruise control on the right-hand side, throttle side of the bike. Let's take a look at the left side now. Left side of the bike, clutch side of the bike, you've got a few different controls. Again, totally different than what Kawasaki does on other bikes. Usually they have a trigger to flash your high beams. You don't have that here. You just have the high beam, low beam switch like that. Your horn is up high. Again, normally on a Kawasaki that's below your signal lights. The other thing about your signal lights is they are very large, large buttons here again. So all clunky, big controls, again, sort of fits that big bike kind of feel. And then you've got your volume, your tuning, and your squelch there, so you can adjust various controls for communication. The hardest one to reach is the one you're going to use the least, and up top here you have your typical controls for your radios. So all easy to control. And again, no menu systems, no fancy TFT display, just lots of switches. It's always available to you. A lot of time on a menu system, when you have like a series of things, you have to make sure you're in the right display screen on your TFT display in order to choose what you need to do. Everything is right there at your fingertips all the time, which is one of the nice things about having more buttons and less screens, is everything's right there at your fingertips always. And again, this is the same on both bikes. So now let's start focusing on a lot of the key differences between these bikes. And the first thing we're going to show you is you've got this sort of grayed out color protection bar here, crash bar there on the Vaquero. So you have your full wind getting through there. Up higher, again, a lot of blacked out pieces. Interestingly, there's still a chrome piece connecting the signals there, but you have a lot of blacked out pieces around the headlight there, and you have sort of blacked out fake air vents over there, and then of course the shorter windshield. So all of that's on the Vaquero. Let's take the same look at the Voyager now. So again, we've got a different paint scheme here. We haven't really looked at this bike yet. We've got a lot more chrome. It used to be sort of dark fork tubes there. You've got chrome fork tubes here, and you still got the chrome signal light, so you can still see that family kind of resemblance here, but you've got a different crash bar here. This one happens to be chrome, and then you've got wind protection in there. Now those have doors that open that allow some wind through. We're gonna show you that from the other side in just a second here. As we move up though, instead of having the black surrounds, you've got the chrome surrounds again, and instead of having that black fake vents, you actually have extra lighting there. Now you can get that on the Vaquero if you wanted to. It's an accessory from Kawasaki, but you get the standard on the Voyager. So it's not just the top case that you get on the back, it's also the lighting up front, the extra wind protection in there as well. And then as you go further up, you have a much taller windshield. Again, hard to see on this shot here, but I'll just sort of show you here. Windshield comes up right over to here as opposed to just being a few inches. Now you can switch the windshields on either of these. It's the same mount on both, so you can have the same mount there as you do over here, but you have a much taller windshield. So let's take a look at the back side of this front fairing and the lower fairings and show you some of the differences that you would get. So starting here on the left side foot pad, again, exact same foot pad as you have on the other side. You can notice the heel toe shifter. Again, that's the exact same. You'll also notice the chromed or more chromed pieces here on the engine and everything else in there. So again, that chrome is a little different, but what we're really looking at as far as differences is right there in that lower fairing. Again, you had no lower fairing on the Vaquero, but what you have over here is, if I can find it here, is a piece that you can move this door, and it has several clicks. You can kind of hear that on my microphone there. I'm not miking it. But what that does is open up that airflow to allow you to have that cooling. And it is something that I think you could probably push closed with your foot, but maybe hard to open with your foot as far as closing it down. So you have much better wind protection on the Voyager than you would on the Vaquero, especially down low. Again, fairings up top, very, very similar, if not the exact same, but fairings down low are different here on this model. So we're starting this shot out with a full wide angle. We'll go into sort of a normal view here, and I just want to sort of place where we are. So one of the things you're going to notice about the dash here is that's just black plastic. Now it does blend very nicely with this sort of metallic dark gray color. We'll show you the paint color in just a second there. But we'll come back around to the speakers. Again, all that upper dash looks very much the same. We'll show you the gauges in a second, which are slightly different. You've got chrome surrounds instead of black surrounds on the speakers. You've got the same storage areas there, and then you have a different button down here. This button is just sort of blacked out on the Vaquero, but that is for those accessory lights that were beside your headlights. So those driving lights, you have that button down there. Other than that, functionally this is the same, but of course stylistically it's much different in that you have chrome everywhere, as you can see up top here. And then we're going to take a look at the gauges here just to show you a little bit different sort of style to them as well. So we talked about that key. It's the exact same thing on this bike here, but you'll notice a few differences. Instead of having an orange Kawasaki down there, it's white, and instead of having red backlit gauges in here, you actually have white backlit, and again, no red detail. Different fonts, completely different look to the actual gauges themselves, but same exact screen in the center there. So you can sort of see that neutral light I was talking about earlier. Your gear shift would be in there, gear indicators would all be there. Fuel gauge, temperature gauge, same positioning, same everything else, but different style to the gauges there. So just a little different look to this bike. You could call it, in my opinion, a little bit less modern, more retro in this style, and a little bit more modern on the Vaquero, but you could call it whatever you want. I'm not a style naming person, but there is a difference there. So taking a look at this bike, again, it looks much bigger because of the rear big bag on the top, and it feels a little bigger with the higher windshield up there. But again, same thing. You feel some weight as you pull it up, but once you're on it, it feels very controllable. It's not super intimidating. Again, as long as this isn't your first motorcycle, you'll probably be totally fine with it. Obviously, that rear seat is different. We're going to show you that in a second. You've got some two-tone paint. We'll show you that in a second as well. But overall, you can just see a lot more wind protection. The wind protection with this bigger windshield is going to send everything over my helmet. I'm about 6 feet tall, so again, doesn't matter how tall you are, you're gonna have good wind protection on this bike. And again, the speaker grills, everything's gonna give you wind protection right down to your feet. So you can drive this bike in a little bit cooler weather and a little bit more rain, that kind of thing, and stay far more weather protected if that's what you want. Now, if you want to, you could put on a windshield. You could even have two windshields. It's not that hard to swap out the windshields. Yes, you do need some tools, but you could swap them out yourself and lower it down on the hot summer days, open up the vents down low, get that airflow coming through. But if you're going on a tour, throw that big windshield back on. If it gets cool in the mornings, you close those foot pegs or foot vents open, and that'll allow you to have that space of the air coming through on this bike. So a little bit more versatility as far as weather protection on this bike. But let's take a look at the backside now and really show you the differences there. So taking a look at the rear saddlebag of the Voyager, remember the Vaquero, it opened from the side and it is a different style. This one you're going to open up from the top here, turn that and open up like this. Now I'm going to show you a different angle here in a second, but you can see that's a much different style. It's going to give you some different functionality. So let's just show you that from the better angle now. So you're now at the front of the bike looking back at the bike, and I will admit that it makes this look much smaller on the angle you're at. You can see it's, you know, if there's my arm there, it is much bigger than it appears on camera. So fairly deep here. One of the benefits with this is even if it's packed up into the lid area, which is again very hollow, you can pack things up tall. If it falls, it's kind of going to lean against the bike or lean against the cap over here. So you don't have that sort of side opening thing where things can fall out a little easier. And in my mind, these appear a little bit bigger, if not bigger, then certainly a little bit more functional in the fact that it's sort of up and down loaded. I think this makes the most sense for a true touring bike, although I'm used to something like the Versa 650, which is side opening, and that works well for me as well. You can't fit a full-size helmet in either of these side cases on either of these bikes, so that's just something to keep in mind. You have to go with a half helmet to fit it in here if you want to put them in the side cases. Take a look at this rear case. You can see the great lighting here in the main showroom here at Jim Gilbert's Power Sports. You can see that sort of metallic flake. We can zoom right in that for you. So really nice deep metallic flake on this bike. And again, compared to the other bike, it's more of that matte color. So again, if you're sort of a paint scheme kind of person, there's the matte color. Let's go back over here and look at this. So again, we're looking at the top box here. The bike is angled on its side stand. That's how you would park it. And we're going to open this up. It does have a lock right here. You can sort of see my finger right there on the side of the shot. And then you have the two latches right here, which open it up. You will have to tip the antenna. Let me just show you that. You can tip that antenna a little bit back. Sometimes people have it straight upright, but you have to tip that antenna a little bit back. You can see a nice gasket here. So again, it's going to be weather protected here. And it's a large opening rear hatch. You can see sort of the design in the bottom there. Nothing fancy here, just a plastic opening, nothing too heavy either. It does have the backrest on there. You can customize that backrest, which is again harder to show, but it is a very large hatch back here, which is going to hold a lot of the stuff that you need on a longer tour and give you a little bit extra space. And again, just very well, easy to access. You can get to everything in there without any issues. So that's one of the big differences, but there's also a big difference in rear lighting on these bikes, even though they appear the same from a stop. Let me show you the difference in lighting. So the angle I'm filming at doesn't show that these lights are identical. And again, the camera doesn't always pick up the lights perfectly, but this light and the lower light are identical. What you may notice here on this Voyager is that this is also lit up. This is a real sort of signature piece to the bike. So when you hit the brakes on this bike, again, just that light lights up, which again, you're not on the greatest angle to see it and the camera doesn't pick it up great, but you can see it very clearly with your actual eyes. Now you are on a better angle for this bike and you can see the whole back end of this lights up. To me, I love that on a touring bike. You may be traveling places you're less familiar, maybe traveling places where maybe people are less familiar seeing motorcycles sometimes. Well, you've got that extra big rear light there. And again, all of that is stock stuff on this bike, which is kind of cool to have. So I mentioned earlier in this video that the rear seat, especially the second seat, is the real difference, but you actually have a different seat front and rear on the Voyager here than you do on the Vaquero. And I'm going to show you that because this is a two-piece seat. Now you can see, if you're a nerd like me, there are some differences in the side of the seat here as we go across, but if you're not a nerd like me, you're just going to notice that the front seat looks and really just feels very similar, but it is a one-piece seat on the Vaquero. Now one thing I will point out as we zoom a little closer over there is that it does narrow in the back end here. Now, as you see this sort of narrowing area, it doesn't come nearly the small size of a sport bike. It's still a very large seat. It's going to be very comfortable for your passenger. Remember that the Vaquero only has foot pegs instead of foot boards. That's the other difference there. You can absolutely take a passenger on this, but again, as we zoom back out and take a look at the Voyager, not only is it a wider seat, it's also got that huge backrest and keeps you really kind of locked in. And this allows the passenger to move with the bike without having to hang on to the rider in the same way, because those wings there are going to keep the passenger in line with the bike, which is going to keep everything in control and allow your passenger to just ride and enjoy themselves without having to pay as much attention to you as they would have to on other types of bikes where they have to sort of pay attention to leaning with you and that kind of thing. So huge differences in the seats there. Again, absolutely capable of taking a second passenger in the Vaquero, but of course you're going to have a lot more luxury for the passenger with both the seat and the foot boards instead of foot pegs on the Voyager. So let's talk about who these bikes are for and who they're not for. So first of all, in this class, especially in the Voyager's class, you really do have options with higher technology. Most of those cost significantly more than the Voyager, and a lot of them are going to lose that V-twin traditional motorcycle feel. So what you're getting with these is that old-time V-twin feel, that true motorcycle feel that a lot of you have wanted for a long time. Like I said off the top, if you wanted Apple CarPlay and that's just part of the joy, you're not going to get that with these. You can put on a GPS. They actually have GPS mounts right from Kawasaki, so you can add that. You can add your accessories on this, so you can still do all your tours on this. You can put your phone mount. You can do all those kinds of things. But these are back to traditional motorcycles with very modern, very reliable powertrains. Now, I say very modern. They're not brand new, redesigned this year. They've been out for a while. Like I said off the top, one of the keys to bikes that have been out for a while, especially cruiser bikes like this, is that there's a lot of aftermarket accessories. So of course you can go through Kawasaki's accessories, but what's cool about these is you can own them for years and years and years. And if you want to tweak it throughout the years to make it more suited to how you are, to change it up a little bit just because you're bored and you want to change something up, there's so many aftermarket accessories because these exact bikes have been around long enough that, like I said, it makes it worth it for an aftermarket company to make the accessories. Even if these were to switch out into a whole new model next year, you've still got a long history, so people will still have a variety of components that can be used on these bikes, and you can really make them your own. And you'll see out there, a lot of people really have made them their own. But from the factory, Kawasaki does a great job of making these true to what they are. I always sort of view Kawasaki as sort of a dirt bike, sport bike company, but when they get into these cruisers, they really hit the market well. These engines aren't highly strung out like a race bike. They're really loping, powerful, torquey engines that fit the character exactly of what you would want. You've got all the controls at your fingertips, not tons of screens to dig through, so you're getting that traditional motorcycle feel. So like I said off the top, if your idea of motorcycling is all about the places it can take you and having that true feel and that riding experience along the way, these bikes can get you that. They don't have some of the technologies that some of the higher end and higher priced bikes have, but what they do have is a ton of reliability, all of that classic charm in something that is very, very current in the sense that these are modern bikes still. These are 2024 motorcycles. They still have modern warranties. You can take care of it from the beginning. You don't have to buy a used bike that you don't know if it's maintained. For the same price, you can get a new bike that gives you all the style you want. So, is it right for you? You'll have to tell me in the comments as well. I've done these bikes in 2023 as well, talked about a lot of things. One of the things I didn't talk about here is that there's some air suspension adjustments. You can do that as well to just sort of preload, adjust up that rear shock with the little hand pump. So there's lots of things you can do with these bikes to make them unique. We talked about that in another video. Lots more to talk about. If there's things you want to know that I didn't cover in this video, make sure you let me know in the comments below. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to cover these bikes and all kinds of their competitors. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you in the next one.